I was sitting in a sunbeam, feeling very disoriented. And it just came to me like, oh, right, breath. My breath is always me. And I just breathed and I was like, right, I'm all of my meditation practices, I've always breathed into my experience. So I just started breathing into any of those ones that I could sense. And I got the sense of, oh yeah, okay, here I am. I found my ground. I'm still in the breakers. They're still there, but I found the ground. My feet are on the ground now.
Hey everyone, I'm Tammy Sollenberger, the author of The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about who they are, the different parts of themselves, and for those who want to connect with their true self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
I am so excited today to talk with Beth Mullen-Houser. She is a clinical psychologist with a passion for working with providers new to IFS. I'm so excited about this, Beth. I'm going to finish your bio, but I'm just going to, the distracted parts are here already that are like, this is such an important conversation. And I know you and I have talked on and off over the past couple of years about putting more content out there for people that are new to the model. Like, where do you start? What do you do? So whether you're a therapist, a practitioner, a clinician, a client, because we all are clients. So we're all, I'm a client, you're a client, we're all clients to IFS. And so I had to interrupt the bio to say that. So your IFS journey includes being an IFS-informed therapist for 4 years, an IFS researcher, speaker, consultant, and you're currently PAing a level 1 training, which you're doing this week.
Today.
We're super excited today.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is today? Today is Wednesday. So is it a week long? Is it a week long?
This is the bridge day.
Oh, got it. Okay. I was like, wait, it's a Wednesday with the trainings. Okay. So you're doing a bridge day today. Okay. And you presented at the annual conference this year, and we met in person when you did that, which I love that. And you do lots of stuff with a Great Lakes IFS retreat, and you're a member of the Foundation for Self-Leadership's research development team, including a recent collaboration on a research article submitted to a peer review journal. What was that?
Yeah. So working with Mike Fitzgerald as the primary author, and Eleni Tal, who is the IFS Foundation's research director. So it's looking at qualities of self with a self scale and how that relates to women's alcohol use and overuse, which is so cool.
Really?
It's so cool. And
I have read stuff already about that. I'm like, oh
no, but it's good. So, kind of generally, and this is the paper is not out yet, but generally finding that as self is measured with the scale, that you have alcohol use that is healthier with greater, kind of self on board.
Yeah. Which I guess that would make sense. But I love that it's alcohol use that is healthier.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's start with you telling me about you talk about the beginning of your IFS journey, and you talk about it being very chaotic. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So Tammy, I think it might have been like 3 years ago, actually, that I contacted you because I was just starting IFS therapy myself. And when I started my own IFS therapy journey, I already had 20 years of meditation experience under my belt. And I was mindfulness-based practitioner for 20 years, and I taught meditation. So I had a sense of knowing my internal system really well. And the really interesting thing was when I started IFS, all of a sudden there was more there than I had ever encountered in my mindfulness practice. Or it came into greater focus, maybe. And it wasn't just there, but it was more active. And I got the sense of so many different parts jumping in and blocking, and other ones needing. So almost like there's a scratch that other parts were in front of, so I couldn't itch it. Like I couldn't get to the ones who really needed because of all these blocking, and just so it was a chaotic mess of all these parts.
Wow.
Luckily, I had a very really wonderful IFS therapist, Patty B, who said, "Yeah, Beth, that's just the peanut gallery. They all come out." Like when you're finally there, they just all are like,
Mhm.
"Whoa, who's this?
Yeah.
What's going
Yeah.
on?" So that was really helpful to have her say that. But at the same time, it was interesting. It was almost like I was, so to use a metaphor, the ocean. Do you like swimming in the ocean? Like I know I was actually born in New Hampshire. It's pretty cold in New Hampshire,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Swimming
ocean.
in the, where were you born?
I was born in Hanover, I
Okay.
believe.
Okay.
My mom will actually listen to this. She's an IFS therapist.
Hi, Mom.
Hi.
So how long did you live here?
Just until I was two.
Okay. Yeah, swimming in the ocean in New Hampshire is not a thing I do really. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a beach person, which everybody probably
Okay.
knows if you listen to this. So I will go to the beach all the time. And if it's
Yeah.
really hot, I will kind of put my feet and splash in it a little bit because it feels like it has icicles in it.
Yeah.
You get in it, like
Yes.
it has ice in it. There's
Yes.
icicles in this water.
And this is
Um,
in July.
yeah. In the heat of August, you're like, ah. But I have I don't want to forget what you're saying and get off on sort of beach and ocean. But yes, I'm from Maryland and I would swim in the
Oh
ocean
yeah.
in Maryland. And we would
Yeah.
vacation in North Carolina and I would definitely swim
Oh,
in the waves.
so
Yeah.
beautiful. So
Yeah.
in the waves, there's this part of the waves, especially if you're on like the ocean side, the Pacific Atlantic, where they get pretty big. And if you're right in the beginning, it's pretty calm. You're just playing a little bit with the water and your feet in it. If you go out past the breakers, then it's also pretty calm. But when you're in the breakers, you can get tumbled.
Yeah.
The first time I was ever had that happen, I was in California with a good friend who's a really strong swimmer, and I didn't know about the breakers. I was a lifeguard, like I knew I was a good swimmer, but I didn't know. So all of a sudden, I'm tumbled. I couldn't figure out what was up or where was down and where to put
Yeah.
my feet. So starting IFS therapy felt like that.
Mm.
It felt like I was in the breakers, and I didn't have a sense of who was me.
Oh, wow.
And I now realize I also was having develop an IFS therapy part who is like, we need to do this right. There's this thing, self. Self is really good. Where is self? Wait, am I self? What is self? But wait, I don't know. I don't feel self. Wait, maybe I should be doing it, but I can't. And this was the breakers of
That's
what
good.
is me.
Yeah.
And it was really disorienting. And I remember one day, probably after I would have contacted you, I think, I was sitting in a sunbeam, feeling very disoriented, which you can't really be when you have like a 9-year old. You gotta be on, especially I think this is during maybe COVID lockdown.
Oh.
And it just came to me like, oh, right, breath.
Mhm.
My breath is always me. And right, that's right. And I just breathed and I was like, right, I'm all of my meditation practices, I've always breathed into my experience. So I just started breathing into any of those ones that I could sense. And I got the sense of, oh yeah, okay, here I am. I found my ground. I'm still in the breakers, they're still there, but I found the ground. My feet are on the ground now. Yeah.
Wow, that's
And
so beautiful. Mm.
I later, after I did the IFS Circle, got into the continuity program and did the wonderful one with Sue Richmond about groups. And she said in it, the breath connects our parts to ourself.
Wow.
It both helps us get that little bit of unblending. If you're breathing into it, you're not in it, you're with it. And it also keeps you connected. So it's both at the same time.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So I have two thoughts. One is I want to talk about this part because I've heard this before. The part that says, "Where am I? Who am I?" Sort of that that sort of what is self? Who am I self? Who's self? Do I have a self? Like sort of that part that's like in the breakers, in the breakers, getting tousled about. I want to talk about that. And then I want to talk about what you just said about the blending, that breath, that kind of, you said it beautifully. Breath helps me unblend, or you didn't say it that way,
Yep.
but that, yeah, that I want to talk about that too.
Great.
You have to pick which one that goes first.
Let me see here. Um, how about the first part about being tousled, being in the breakers? Because
Yeah.
that was sort of that was what was happening first.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think I needed, I wanted to do this podcast at 3 years ago. I contacted you and you were so in your infinite graciousness said, yeah, do you want to do it? I was like, no, I don't know IFS. I can't do it.
Oh,
But
that's
it's,
right. That's right. Because you were like, I think we need a
yeah,
podcast episode about this.
yes.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't feel ready, but it's persisted with me over the last 3 years. And I've had enough people in different trainings I've been in who have described something that sounded similar.
Yeah.
And then when I've described my journey and process with it, it seemed to help them kind of get clarity. So
And that
that's what
helped
I
your
guess I'd
system
start
say,
with.
I can speak for this then, because you knew that it's a common experience, like knew that it
That's
was a
right.
common experience. Okay. So
That's right.
one of the things I love that you're saying about this is you recognized it was a part. And as soon as you recognized it was a part, that did something to that settled something down too.
Yeah, so there was a lot of parts that were part of were the waves, but yeah, I think actually even as we talk about this, I'm getting more clarity. The being in the breakers was the part trying to find out who was me,
Oh, wow. Okay.
is my sense of that. So there's this IFS, like what call my IFS therapy part that was trying to figure it out and has a lot of creativity and curiosity, but was not able to figure it out. And so was feeling really unmoored.
Yeah. And I wonder if um coupled with 20 years of meditation and mindfulness, this part was like, wait a minute, we know how to do this. Like this is something we know how to do.
And should know how to do.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
There's a really interesting line of research around this, if I could throw that in. First of all, there's a wonderful book by Daniel Trelevin about trauma-based mindfulness, because going inside for people with trauma histories, which I'm thankful in my lifetime not to have had, but for people who do, this can be even more fraught, as I'm sure you're aware, because going inside, there's a lot there. And so he has a wonderful book describing some ways that you can do that more safely. And he does mention IFS as being one of the safer ways to do it, really bringing a lot more safety.
Mm.
There was just a study published last year by a research group that includes two people that really piqued my interest. There's a woman named Willie B. Britton, who is a researcher on the East Coast who studies mindfulness related adverse events. Mindfulness is amazing, right? So we just have a huge body of research showing the many, many wonderful things that happen when you adopt a mindfulness practice. And there can also be these harder things. So they did a study, a group that included also Dr. Richie Davidson out of UW-Madison, who is one of the big neuroscience mindfulness gurus, has worked with the Dalai Lama and such. And they found that these mindfulness related adverse events are actually much more common than they had even hypothesized, and include things. So at times, these events, the disability, or not disability, but the distress from it can last longer than they had anticipated to. So there is all this information about how it is really wonderful to go inside, and that it can have its challenges, especially when we first start.
Yeah, and I'm guessing really acknowledging that and then letting people know that is common and that is okay. And we can be with the parts that are afraid to go inside for whatever reason they're afraid to go inside, whether it's, they're going to be flooded or they're going to be, reminded of these memories that the parts really keep at bay. So that, that makes a lot of sense that we can check in and just, I was going to say, even sort of talk about those parts as a way to establish some
Yes.
safety.
That's right. That's why IFS, one of the many reasons it's so beautiful, because it does bring so much safety. When there's parts that are overwhelmed, we go to those and hang out with them first, right?
Yeah.
Instead of pushing past them, which is from some personal conversations I've had with that research group, that is potentially where some of these hard things happen, is when the mindfulness teachers are encouraging people to push past their hesitancy.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And in my IFS, we don't push past.
Mm.
So that's what was helpful to me when I was in the breakers, to take that breath, which helped me back up, and to
Mm.
say, oh, there you are. You're scared,
Mm.
but I'm here with you. I was in it before, but then that breath helped me to be with it
Yeah.
and to recognize it as a precious one that was just trying to help, but I could be with it.
Yeah. So that brings us to the idea of being in it or being with it.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what that means. Um, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So, I had, before I came to IFS, I was an acceptance commitment therapy therapist for a long time. And so they have a practice called diffusion, which is somewhat similar to unblending, which is getting that little bit of distance. So I had a long time of practicing that with myself and clients. Um, and self as context, which is sort of what we call big S self. So this being with is when we can bring ourselves or our clients to recognize the experience they're having, and in recognizing it, notice there's one who can notice, right? As we know. And so that's being with. And of course, when we're in it, when we're all the way blended, all the way fused, we can't notice it. We're seeing through it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think that we sometimes we talk about this very fast and we move on to other components of IFS without
yeah.
realizing that this really is not that it's hard, but it is challenging to be like, oh, I am in a part that believes this, that feels this, that's experiencing this. Okay. Okay, this is just a part of me. I mean, that is huge in noticing that I'm the noticer. I'm the noticer and I'm with this thing. Just that alone is such a huge step and such a huge shift. But it's not such an easy peasy thing to do that we sort of, because we can just go on and talk about the F's and talk about the unburdening and the ritual and da 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 da. But it's like this thing right here is the thing that we're all struggling with all day long, like all day long, right?
Yes.
All day long, me and my clients and you probably are in parts. And like, how do I do that thing that I might do in an hour of therapy a week? Like, how do I do that thing, that unblending thing or that being with
Yes.
thing?
I love that. And that, the more that I work with people new to IFS, the more that I firmly believe that is the magic right there.
Yeah.
And I have found ways for myself to do that I have found to be pretty effective, because the real magic is, how do we do it in the situations that are hardest?
Yeah.
When I have my IFS meditation on and listening to, whoever's Jenna's voice, your voice, Dick's voice, it's a lot easier. But when I'm with a client, or when I'm with the person that's hard for me to be with, how do I do it in that moment? There's the noticing that I'm in it. And then there's also the practice of how do I, even after I've noticed, how do I help this part to be with me rather than jumping back into blend?
Yeah. 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 So what are your tricks? Because one thing that that's coming up for me, I don't know why I'm thinking about this right now, but I'm thinking about like, sometimes my parts are like, no, I want to do this. Like I want to yell.
Yes.
I want to eat that extra thing. I want to, I know I'm in a part. This is a part, right? I know I'm in a part and I don't care. And you can unblend later, but I really want to yell.
Yes, that's right. Well, I can tell you a couple different things. So I have my own experience of what has worked for me really well. And I also sent out a text to my chain of my amazing staff, PA staff, yesterday and said, "Hey, I'm just curious how you all have found." And I have a whole list of things that they found
Good thing I asked that
because
question.
totally. And is it okay if I back up for just a quick second and
Please.
talk about why
Yes.
this is so important? So
Yes.
there is also research. Sorry, I just love research. So I am always bringing it in.
Well,
There's
you're a
research
clinical
about,
psychologist, so I would assume that.
that's why I went into clinical psychology because I love the research. Like, why else would you do it, right? Um, so there's
Sorry, that was
research
my
about,
sarcastic part.
I love your sarcastic parts. Um, Wait, I want to pause for just a second and say, Tammy, when I discovered your podcast so early in my journey, it was so amazingly beautiful for me. I felt
Oh,
I like just was so happy. I remember the first time I listened to it, I was walking my dog and just so excited, like, oh my gosh, this is a community that I am like so excited about learning about. You meant so much. In fact, there was this a moment where I heard you say to somebody that you love it with new IFS therapists, how it's like they drank the Kool-Aid. They're all about IFS. And I laughed out loud. And there's this woman passing by me. I have my earbuds in, walking my dog. And I said, I drank the Kool Aid out loud. And she looked at me. She said, it must have been some good Kool Aid. I was like, it is. It's fabulous. It's the best Kool Aid ever.
oh,
Okay.
oh, thank you for sharing
So
that with me. That means a lot.
Oh, I just so appreciate everything that you do. So there is this research that was done. This is there's a lot of research about harmful psychotherapy, actually, and that it's out there. And we all know that from experiences we've had or other people have had, but there is a pretty good research base about it. But one of the most actually striking studies I found about is actually about supervision, which can be as clinical supervision, which can be a similar process, right?
Yeah.
And this researcher named Ellis in 2014 put out this study. It's found that of 363 clinical trainees, half of them, 51%, reported harmful supervision. And they included things that resulted in actual harm to them, including exploitive dual roles, sexually inappropriate, discriminating, is cruel, um, really eliciting shame and blame, violated sense of safety. So let's think about this from the supervisor perspective. These are parts of the supervisor that are doing this. And as therapists, when there's harmful therapy, it's also parts of the therapist that are doing these things. And those parts are trying their best to protect those people, but they're resulting in actual harm. So, this is why I think that this noticing in the moment when we're blended with a part and finding a way to step back into self is so critical. And I was teaching a seminar at a university in the last couple of years, and it was about supervision and the benefits of IFS to learn IFS for your supervision practice. And I said, of course, one of the benefits is exactly this, noticing when you're inside of an experience and it is the one driving the agenda. And I had a participant say, I could never do that in the moment in supervision. I saw some other people nodding their head like, no, that's too hard. I could maybe reflect on it later, but I would never be able to notice it in the moment and to be able to step away from it.
Wow.
And yet we know in IFS it is possible.
Yeah. 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 I wonder about what that is about. I mean, I guess that's similar to the part of me that says, if I'm mad at I was thinking yelling, I was thinking about my son. I think our kids are around the same age. So he's 12, he's gonna be
Yeah,
13.
12,
Yeah,
almost 13.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, sort of the changes, which we can talk about that, but let's not. But the changes that are happening. And,
Yeah.
this part of me that I'm finding is yelling at him. And I've never been a yeller. My mom was the yeller. I have all kinds of parts up about a yeller, but I'm like, get your shoes on, get your shoes on, get your shoes on. Like it's just like and I'm like, I don't want to yell. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, come on, let's go. So, but I have this part that's like, in those moments, I want to yell. I'm so frustrated. I've given him 100 freaking warnings. I know I'm parenting wise, I'm not handling this well. I know that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that
Okay,
I
actually,
get that.
can I validate? You said parenting wise, I'm not handling this well. It's just our parts that are up, that are feeling something big, Tammy. I get it too. And I just send so much love to that one.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's hard. It's a transition that's pretty hard.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It is so hard. And there's a reason that one's coming up so big. And I'm saying this to myself as well as to you.
That makes me feel better. Yeah, and as you say that, and we're gonna get back to supervision in parts, but as you say that, what I think what it is it's sadness. It's sadness and loss. That's what it is.
Yes,
And I'm
yes. Our babies.
yeah.
My mom, who's an IFS therapist for forever, she was in one of Dick's original cohorts. She actually, I would give a shout out to her really quick. She created the IFS mandala, the original one. She's an artist as well as an IFS therapist. So she's the one who created that and also brought attachment work into IFS.
That's a big deal. Those are two
Jan,
huge. Yeah, what's your mom's name? Give
Jan
your mom.
Mullen. Jan Mullen. There she
Thanks,
is.
Jan, for all
So
you've done.
for all you've
Wow.
done so much. And she said to me multiple times that the only person she would let take her baby, my baby me, little me away from her was older me.
Wow.
And so our almost 13-year-olds are taking their baby selves away from us, which is the most healthy thing to happen. And yet, right? And yet, those baby selves are not the ones there. Although sometimes I think they come back.
Right, they definitely do, which
It's not always
which I
convenient, actually.
yeah. Which part of me loves, but there's other
Yeah.
parts of me that like need consistent like younger parts of me that need consistency in a attachment wounding kind of way, which I'm working on because I do not have a lot of
Yeah.
consistency in my life right now. And so I think
Yeah.
that might be part of it is sort of these younger parts that have these attachment wounds that need that consistency. And I'm
Yeah.
working with them, but I think that's another piece that I had not thought of, right? Sort of his being a baby and then being a teenager, sort of going back and forth. And my part's
Yeah.
having a hard time with that, just based on consistency, because that
Yeah.
feels really raw. Sort of inconsistency is almost it's like a little small t trauma in my life. Sort of this
Mhm.
inconsistent, all kinds of ways. This is going down a different road right now, Beth. So
It's good though, because Tammy, this is the exact thing that is true whenever we're blended with a part. It's based on something real and that is truly deserving of our love and attention,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? The trailheads. This is trailhead for both of us.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the space on this podcast. But I appreciate the space to talk through it, because even talking through it, and again, sort of talking about, like, I'm not being with my parts, right? I'm just talking about them. But even by talking about them, which is not being with them, but talking about them also gives me some space, and I'm also getting some clarity, right? I'm not doing insight work, but I'm having
Yeah.
some clarity just by talking about them, that actually makes me feel a little softer. And even though I'm crying, which I'm fine with crying, it actually feels like there's a little bit more self here about that situation than I had
Mm.
before. So thank
I
you. And
think,
hopefully, yeah, go ahead.
and my parts are always listening too. Like, I wonder if those parts of you are like, oh, she heard. She's got it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So even though I'm talking about them, again, this is a great unblending, right? I'm talking about the parts.
That's
I'm not in the
right.
parts. I'm talking about them, but they're here. They're always listening. So they get that so it's almost a witnessing, right? Like talking
Yes.
about them to unblend is also a
Yes.
witnessing.
It's a witnessing and it's a validating. So, from my past in the third wave behavioral therapy, is Marshall Linehan of DBT has this six levels of validation that are crucial to healthy development. And actually, when people have some of the biggest challenges mental health wise, it's often because those levels of validation weren't there, but is also crucial to therapy and to being with and as a provider. And, those levels of validation include just noticing and reflecting on what you're seeing, which is exactly what you just did. You validated that part by speaking for it.
Mm, I love that. I love that. Well, I think the cool thing is the part of me that feels a little bit okay about what just happened is, like, it really is a good is a good demonstration of a way to unblend, a way to kind of be
Yeah.
with um in a pretty short period of time,
Yeah.
without, right, like, kind of how we can do that in the moment is, like, just kind of talking about those parts. So I appreciate that
Talking
so
about
much.
them and noticing that you're noticing them.
Yeah.
So there's one that was noticing it, and I was just sensing with you the tenderness you were feeling toward it. And it's, yeah, so that's a connection right there.
Beautiful. Right, that connection for me, and then that connection with you, right? There's something about that connection that you and I are
Yes.
having that feels like a safe, like a safer place for that,
Yeah.
for me to do that exploration.
And, so that's another part of actually going back to that early, and I want to get back in a moment to the ways we can blend. But
It's like a
one of the things,
teaser.
it's a teaser. One of the things also my IFS therapist part thought in early therapy was that I had to create this connection of self and it had to be the one to do the healing. But
Mm,
and I know I've heard other people say this, I didn't want that. Parts of me wanted to be with other people in the healing.
yeah. Okay.
And I had such a huge craving for IFS community. And I have so much love and tenderness for those people who want the level one training and can't get in and are just craving that IFS community, but are having a harder time. I think luckily there's more and more ways to get trainings before level one, but I have that part of me that thought I have to do it all on my own has learned that actually we don't.
Mm,
Chris
mm,
Burris says we're wounded in community, in relationship, and we heal in relationship, right? Part of
mm.
that relationship is with ourselves. And I can now, through after 3 years of therapy, right? I found my sense of self more and more, and I can bring a lot of warmth and love to those ones. But also, being here with you in that community is also, there's so much healing that happens anytime, which is part of why I'm going to be having these IFS groups and I'm doing Chris Burse's training in April. I'm so excited. um, because I want to bring the possibility of IFS healing in community to anyone, including people who are waiting for level one and people who have finished level one, either one, but these affinity groups. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I think it is so important. So whether you're waiting for level one, which I know is so frustrating,
Yeah.
and so many parts up about it. And so whether you're waiting for level one or you just did level one, because I did this and Chris was my level one trainer. So
Ah,
I love him. Um, but I remember being so after so I did group stuff before level one and after level one, because it takes practice. And I read Dick said somewhere he called IFS a movement. And I thought,
mhm.
yeah, because it's really, we
Yeah.
talk about this all the time, right? It's not just a therapy model. I mean, it is a therapy model, but it's a movement. And I thought, yeah, like, so if we want to practice unblending and we want to talk about these things and we want to do that in community, because that's the best way to heal and to learn
Yes.
and to grow,
Yes.
then we need those places. And so it's not
Yeah.
like, people that just do level one and then just go into the, like, that's great. That's great. But I don't think that's, not that it's not enough, but I think that there's more. You're miss I don't know, this sounds a little too direct, but I'm a little bit like you're missing out if you just do that.
It's my experience. So having been when I did level one and also as PAing, the people who have prior experience with their own IFS therapy, and also especially if it's been in a group format too, I see so much easier access to unblending and to connecting with self, being in self. So I think level one is amazing. It's absolutely hands down the best clinical training I've ever been in. And it can only do what it can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I think that it is really, really important to continue our learning about how our own systems, which includes ways to be able to unblend.
Perfect. So why don't I think that you might have a list of ways
I have
to
a list.
unblend. How about sharing that list with us?
You bet. So the way that I myself have learned that works so beautifully for me is um, this image of a campfire. And I've heard other people say this too. I think there's something about warmth that helps for a fair number of people be able to access self. So if I have a part in session that has come up, let's say a feeling of fear that this client is not doing well and I'm not a good enough therapist, and so wants to start coming in and directing therapy instead of staying open to the client's process. If I can recognize that, but it doesn't want to let go because it's scared, I bring up this image of a campfire and we have a bench made out of a log. And I invite the part to come sit next to me, right next to me. I can have my arm around it and to feel the warmth of the fire with me, both of us just basking. And it is amazing. It will, most of the time, it will do that. And I have, through my own therapy process, came to realize that for me, that fire is actually feels like my connection to the divine.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're both there with that.
Mm.
And then I'm able to bring what feels right for me is to drop into my heart center and to be aware of the client from there,
Mm.
which has just the agenda. And I can feel this physically now. That's just such an important part. When we learn about our own systems, we can learn what it feels like, actually, how we experience self, however that is, whether it's an image, a sound, a physical feeling, an emotion. Um, I have that sense. And then the only agenda really is curiosity about what the client system needs and compassion and warmth and all that. So sometimes, though, I have a part that has such big energy, it can't just sit on a stool next to me. And I've also been lucky in my IFS journey, my own, to find a guide that is really loves dancing. It's actually a guy with long hair for whatever reason, and will dance with, invites these ones to dance with him by the
Mm,
fire, and will even invite all this whole dance troupe to come dance and stomp it out. And
wow.
they love that.
Wow.
So
Well, and I
then,
think they like that better than sitting in the therapy room. You're like, go dance with my guide around the fire and let me just be here with this client. I mean, doesn't that
that's
sound, I mean, not
right.
that I don't love doing therapy, but that sounds way more fun
These
for my,
little
yeah,
ones,
of
oh yeah, these little ones
course.
don't want to be the ones doing the therapy.
Oh,
No, they're like, I'd rather go dance around the fire and stomp. They're like, I'm upset. I can't
yeah.
just sit there. Yeah, stomp it out, sweet one.
I love that. I love that. But here's what I know. Here's what I know is that you have to practice doing that in order for that to be something that happens quick in the moment with your client.
That's
Like
right.
that can't be something that you're like that has to be something that your system is used to so
Yep.
that you can just maybe so for me, I could maybe just put my hand on my heart and then that is sort of a quick reminder of like, hey, go stomp it out, right? Or some sort of because that has to be something that you have practiced in
Yeah,
order to do it in the moment.
that's right. That's exactly right. So outside of session, this is one thing I learned when I was lucky to do some consultation work with Fran Booth before my level one. And I brought a tape of my, honestly, one of my worst sessions because I wanted to show her, like, this is the worst it gets. And she said,
Good for you. Good for you. Right. You're like,
oh,
I'm not
thank
just bringing
you.
my good tape here. Yeah.
That's right. It actually got a lot better later in the session. I was able to show her, like, no, I actually did. Like, honestly, I could be better than this. But, and she helped me realize that what I was doing was in this time where the client was saying some things that my IFS therapist part didn't know what to do with. I had at that point like literally a 5-page single space list of for every step of the IFS process, the questions you could ask. And I was scanning it like, oh no, what do I do in this moment? And so there's this
Oh,
awkward pause, there's this confusion, there's probably irritability coming up in me. Like, why is a client making this so hard? Why can't, I can't. And I'm looking through this list and it's like, yeah, Beth, here, you're trying so hard, and I love that you have this part that is really really trying so hard. But that's a part. Here's what that part can do. It's amazing. It can scan that list between sessions. So between sessions is when you learn the F's, and you can have a couple keywords on post-its on your computer or wherever you are, but that's all. And in between sessions, you learn the questions, but when you're in session, you just drop into self. And I was so fortunate to attend C Sykes workshop at the conference. And C said that self to part connection in the client is really that's the thing right there. And so and sell our own self is what draws that. So as a new to IFS therapist, really finding our own self in that moment that we're with the client, dropping into it, being with it, however that is for us, is the thing that is going to call forth the client's self
mm,
and help to develop that relationship with their part.
mm,
And their parts will learn what self is through our self.
that's beautiful. I have parts that love so I did a workshop at the conference years ago called What the F Am I Doing? So I
I
have
love that.
parts that love your like looking at the list. And I did something similar where I would write, I maybe probably did a shorthand, but I had this piece of paper next to me because they talked about that in level one, like keep a piece of paper next to you. And people came up with all of these crazy charts and all these things, and it was so
Yeah.
overwhelming. So for me, it was I would
Yeah.
write down like what are some of my favorite questions and what are the things that I tend to
Yeah.
say, and I would listen to demos and write down every single question the person said.
Yes, that's exactly what I was doing. I would stop with my iPhone. I was listening to Dick do sessions and like on the notes thing, start writing down what he said and then go put it on my list.
I love it. I love it. So I love that part. And I love this idea that look at it between sessions, like look at
Yep.
it, study it, make it your own, like do all of that between sessions. Because I think you do need, like, this idea that like, okay, just need to be in self and be open hearted as your clients. I love that. And I think that's true. But we also have a protocol and we also have the F's, and
Yes.
there's a thing that we need to follow. And so I love doing that in between, so that in the session you can actually just really enjoy and drop in and be more self-led, and then trust. So I had a part, this little boy part, that was like, I don't know what to say, like I don't know what to say, I don't know what to ask, I don't know what to do. And then when I realized that was a part, he would come play with me, play at my feet with a truck. I'd say just go,
Mm,
just like, so like he would just go
yes.
play at my feet with a truck, because I do
Yes.
know, right? Sort of like he would play at my feet, and then I do know what to ask. I do know what to
That's
say.
right.
So
That's
that
right.
took a while though, but I
Well,
got
and
there.
actually for new IFS therapists, there's another thing, and we honestly will get to the blending stuff, but this was so helpful to me. I would love for people to know about it. And again, Patty B, my therapist, is the one who introduced me to this when I was in that beginning therapist stage and not knowing, feeling so overwhelmed by what I didn't know. So I don't know if you know about the stages of competence that is often in the coaching world. Yeah. So this is, I'll describe it as it was stated in an article in the Journal of Medical Education by Jennifer Peel and Robert Nolan. So it was actually introduced by Noel Birch in the 1970s. And so there's 4 stages when we're learning a new skill. So the first stage is unconscious incompetence. And this is where we don't know what we don't know. And I think this is true for me in all my years of doing therapy before learning IFS. I didn't know what I didn't know. Parts, it's not that parts don't become real when we do IFS therapy with our client. They were always there. I just wasn't working with them skillfully as I could. And the client didn't know about them. So we don't know what we don't know. Then, as I entered learning about IFS therapy through various things before level 1, I entered the second stage, which is conscious incompetence, where all of a sudden we realize what we don't know. And that is so uncomfortable. And that's this,
You
I
actually
think
think you're
that
like dumber, like I'm dumber than I was before.
feels dumber. And it's scary. Like, oh, there is all this stuff that I could be doing and that could help the client so much more, but I don't know how to do that right now.
Yeah.
That's where I was when in that session I showed to Fran. Like, I know there's something and I need to find it because otherwise I'm not being a good enough therapist. Yet, all I needed to do in that moment was drop into self. And I did move through. I mean, I would say I'm not at the first step. That's like Dick and amazing other people. But the next step is conscious competence, where you basically, the way I feel is I've started to absorb internally the F's, the step, those questions to ask. And so I don't have to think about it as much now. They just kind of come. And it's where the individual understands or knows how to do something, but it can still require some concentration and you can fall out of it a bit. Yeah. So it's sort of, yeah, having that more easily come to you. The last stage is unconscious competence, where they have so much practice with it that they can do it without thinking very much
Mm, mm,
at all. Yeah.
beautiful. I love that. I love that. Well, we're gonna run out of time, so we need to do this blending list, and I'm not gonna interrupt you. I'm just gonna let you tell me
I
all
will
the ways to
actually do it.
unblend.
Okay. So here we go. So it's, I think the first step is really something we just have to do on our own, which is just to be able to notice when a part is there. And it just means getting to know our own system and getting to know what those parts feel like. So it, again, however we do it, it is being in IFS therapy in some way, because I think it happens so much better in community to learn our own system. And once we recognize that a part is there, here's the list that I got from my amazing PA staff. Just saying, hello there, welcome. tuning in with bilateral stimulation music, like having it play in the background for some people can be really helpful. Margaret Conley, who is a just newly appointed assistant trainer, is the one who gave me this. And just turning into that music in the moment helps Margaret to be able to unblend from that part. Breathing, letting the part know I'm there with it and that it can share with me after the session. And then going and doing it. I have to do it. Otherwise, it won't believe you. Lean into and notice the experience to understand if it's informative to the session. This is Michelle Quisenberry, who's an amazing longtime PA, because this is something that we know from the somatic, right? The amazing somatic IFS work is that sometimes the parts actually can have such information for us about the session. And if it does, to listen and then also let it know we can come back to it later. And if that information is important to the session, after we've paused and listened to that information, you can bring it into the session if it's appropriate. If it's not appropriate for the client, then just letting it know again. Thank you for that information. I'll come back to that later. Validating that part. And then they can, once that happens, they're more likely to open up space. Recognizing, is it a caretaker part or I have to help the client part, right? I think this is so common for us. And you can say the client will be better served if I am not trying to help so much. Yeah, Cease also talks about this. And that what the client really needs is just that access to self. Noticing in that moment, in the moment, what can I see, hear, and feel? 3 things of each that helps bring back into this moment, because our self is here in this moment. And then being able to do these other things with the part. This is kind of part of, maybe partly from Lock Kelly. What is it that's aware right now? And then sensing that shared beingness with the client. And also, of course, from Lock Kelly, what is here now when there's no problem to solve? Yeah, helps find that sense of self.
Yeah, I love that. I love Lock Kelly. And I was just telling somebody, this is me interrupting you. I was just telling somebody that I actually there's so many IFS books. And the only books I have read, like from cover to cover, is one of Lock Kelly's. I've read cover to cover and Susan McConnell. I mean, I read the IFS, the level 1 books. I read those because I'm a good student. So I read those books. And I have read a couple other ones, but Lock Kelly is one of the ones that I gobbled it up, highlighted it, wrote notes. Yep. So good. So I love that. What is here when there's no problem to solve? It's such a great question. And of course,
as we're talking about finding self, I have to put a plug in for Seth Copald's new book. That is going to be the other tool that I'm working my way through.
Yes, it's right here. Right. It's right on my desk.
I think that will be the other one I've read cover to cover.
Yeah, I have. Well, that's why it came up. That's why it came up because I'm like, I'm diving into this book this month in December, and and someone was asking me about what books I have read, and I was like, wait, I have bought a lot of them.
That's right. I have a whole bookshelf full of them.
So that's why it just came up for me, because I was like, wait, which ones have I actually really sat down and not just sort of skimmed, but like really took in? And
Tammy, your book too.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes.
I have to say that.
Oh, thank you.
And then just a couple other ones for I talk about dropping into my heart space is useful to me, but that's not going to be everyone's experience. And one of my amazing PAs said, noticing the space between my eyes, looking at the client from the space between my eyes is what really helps them.
Love that.
Yeah. Asking the client if they want to do kind of an arrival practice, a grounding, unblending practice at the start of session. They may or may not want that, but that can be something useful to both of us. Feeling tenderness, warmth, and care for my part, patting my leg and saying, this is a tough moment for us. Here's some love, sweetie.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And the last one is unhooking, defocusing, decentering. so that my awareness is aware of thoughts, emotions, energies, and external sensations.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot Kelly thing too, the unhooking.
It does.
I love all of these, and I love the idea of really knowing. So I just put my hands on my knees as you said that about touching your, like putting your hands on your legs, like really knowing your system in between session, or not just as a therapist, but as before, like I have an interaction with my son later, or I know I'm going to have a conversation with my partner. Like, so not just in
Yeah.
session, but all the time,
All the time.
knowing my system and knowing, okay, here's the posture that is a more relaxed posture, or here's a posture that feels more self-led, or when I feel really connected to self, here's how my body feels. So can I put myself into that posture just to see what
Yes.
that feels like and how that feels different, right? Like, and
Yes.
so then I can do that, right? I can purposely do that in a session, or when I'm talking to my son, or when I'm having a conversation with my partner, or when I'm doing a podcast, like so I can do those things with my body, so that it's a good reminder to, like, okay, like it's sort of a reminder to my parts, I'm right here. To me, so that's
That's
for
right.
me, right? Like I let my parts know I'm right here. I'm right here.
That's
And
right.
these sort of body things are ways to remind my parts that I'm right here.
I have a weighted heating pad that I keep on my lap during sessions. And right now, I mean, partly because it's cold, but also because it is that physical reminder of I'm right here.
I love that. The heat
Yeah,
from the fireplace, the heat from the heating pad. I
for
love
me.
that. Yeah, for you that works. So speaking of
Yeah.
it being cold, Beth, we jumped in and got excited, and I never got to hear
Yes.
where you're from and what you see when you look out the nearest window. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Can we
So
do that?
I'll zoom out and then I'll zoom in a little bit. So my zooming out is I can from my window see bluffs. In Wisconsin, we think of as maybe somewhat flat, but actually right here, it's almost like mini mountains and
Oh,
very rocky rock faces that are beautiful.
wow.
And I can also hear the boats on the Mississippi River that's just a couple blocks away.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. So that I can get up hiking in 5 minutes into some really beautiful areas, which I know New
Wow.
Hampshire also has the water and the hills, and I love both of it.
Yeah.
If I look right out my window, the other thing that's closer is a trucks from the people who are redoing my kitchen. So I can see snow, and it's cold because we have our heating turned off because they're like making dust downstairs. But
So poor Beth has a kitchen remodel in the middle of December, in the middle of
that's right.
PAing. Oh my word.
Although I will say it's a huge privilege, and I'm so thankful it's happening. But
Oh,
that is
good.
another reason why I have a heated, weighted blanket on my lap.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
beautiful here.
It's beautiful here today. It's actually snowing. I didn't know it was supposed to
Ah,
snow. So I moved in my son's room, because when my partner who lives in North Carolina is here, he
yeah,
works downstairs, and I have a tiny house. So I work in my son's room. And so I'm looking out the window, and I can see the river, and I can see the snow, and it is gorgeous. It's so pretty.
yes.
I think the snow is pretty in like December, January, February, March. And then in March-ish, I'm like, oh,
I'm exactly the same way.
yeah.
I can have it gone. I grew up in the Chicago area, and it was pretty much getting to ready to be gone by Easter, and it's not here.
Yeah.
Although I will say, so my son, his one of the beauties of his tween is discovering downhill skiing.
Okay.
Loves it.
Yes.
So he's so excited for the snow to happen.
Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
ski too. So we haven't I
Yeah.
haven't got the skis yet. We do sort of these rental ski things that we can do
Oh
for
yeah.
him. So because
Do you
he
cross country or downhill or both?
downhill.
Yeah, us
Yeah,
too. Us too.
yeah. So fun. Um, so Beth, we're out of time, sadly. What else do you feel like you want to share? Do you want to say anything else about the groups you're running?
Yes, I would love to. So I am going to be hosting groups that are affinity groups for public facing professionals. And that can include counselors, it could be medical professionals like doctors, it could be teachers, where they are in the same profession. So they can bring to the group the parts of them that come up around that profession and be able to work in a group to learn their own systems, to get the community and the support through the IFS model.
That is a great idea.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
It's a great idea.
I've had numerous different professional people say that they think that would be useful. And so I'm so excited to bring that. I'm really looking forward to it. And they can find me on my website. My LLC is selfleadershipjourneys.com. And there's at the bottom of it is a contact form. And I would love to hear from anyone who's interested in that.
Perfect.
The other thing I want to just plug, so I'm also part of the research community, obviously, with the foundation. And the foundation, I just want to do a short plug to the foundation because they do so much good work with research, with bringing people who have had less privilege in the world, bringing IFS to them, including uplifting now through a postdoc position, people who are going to be able to create the research.
Amazing.
And who come from less privilege. So I want to just put a plug in for people being able to, if they feel called to support the foundation, and that's through the foundationifs.org support fund for self-leadership.
Perfect. And they do a newsletter. Was it quarterly?
Right.
That's sort of this email newsletter thing that has a lot
They
of great
do.
articles and yeah, I did like a little advertisement on there. So
they actually have the Parts and Self online magazine you can access at any time and it's fantastic. And you do have a beautiful advertisement on there. So they do that. They do IFS in schools, veteran retreats, Ukrainian therapist initiative. They have training for BIPOC and other marginalized community leaders, as well as other amazing projects.
I love it. That's great. Beth, last question. If you
Yes.
weren't doing all the things that you're doing and you had to do something different, what would you do different?
I would be a National Park Service ranger. I did do some of that before, long before I became a psychologist, and I would be out there in the parks.
Do you have a park,
Probably
a type of park you would do, like mountains, forests, oceans?
Yeah. So I worked with Student Conservation Association. I had an internship at Kure County National Recreation Area, which is the Black Canyon of the Gunnison in Colorado.
Wow.
So I love canyons. And honestly, I think the first thing I would do is I would help lead the river rafting trip that is done by the amazing assistant trainer, Jenny. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on her last name. She was my AT. Anyway, she's amazing. And she leaves a Utah river rafting trip. I think that's the first thing I would do.
That sounds really fun. Yeah. Well, Beth, thank
Jenny
you so
Fiebig.
much for this.
Jenny
Okay.
Fiebig.
Yeah. All right, good. I really appreciate you being so patient with me. I mean, we talked 3 years ago. That's crazy. So
no, you offered it right away. I said, I'm not ready. It was just this summer that I realized I think I'm ready. And I contacted you and right away. You said, yeah, let's do it. So I so appreciate you and everything you bring.
Oh, thank you. Well, I appreciate you and I appreciate the time and that special moment that you gave me. So I appreciate that. Thank you for everything you do for the IFS community, for sure.
Same here. All right. Lovely to be with you, Tammy.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, like, all the things. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or all the places books are available. You can also visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, where you can download a free meditation on getting to know your should parts. You know, there's parts of you who remind you of what you should be doing. They sound a bit critical at times. Yes, we all have them. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and Twitter and the One Inside Facebook page. I'm so grateful for Jack Reardon, who created the new music. Jack is a graduate of Derek Scott's IFS Stepping Stone program. Thanks, Jack, for getting me. And to you, thanks for listening.